Hey, hello everyone. Welcome from Rushi Technologies. This is a continuation to the last session about GitHub Actions. So in last session, we just discussed about what is GitHub Actions, why do we use GitHub Actions, and what are the advantages of using GitHub Actions compared to the other CI/CD tools we just discussed. So continuation to that session, we'll discuss about the GitHub Actions workflows concept. What is workflow in GitHub? How to create a workflows and how that workflows will be triggered based on the events. So what is a workflow? What is events? What is jobs? What is steps in GitHub Actions? And what is actions in GitHub Actions? Again, we'll try to understand all those concepts one after the other in today's session. But before continuing discussing about those topics, right? So if you missed the previous session, right, about GitHub Actions introduction, I recommend you to go through that video. Is also uploaded on our YouTube channel. Maybe you can go to our website. From here also you can navigate to our YouTube channel. Our website is rushitechnologies.com, www.rushitechnologies.com. So here there is a link to the GitHub, YouTube, and our social media pages also. Let me click here. It will take you to this YouTube channel, right? So here, this is our Rushi Technologies YouTube channel. If you have not yet subscribed, right, kindly subscribe and share with your friends, colleagues for top-notch DevOps content here. So here, this is the video where we just started with the GitHub Actions, right? If you missed this previous session, you can go through this session, right, which is there in our Rushi Technologies YouTube channel. And also one more general update before I start. So I am going to start a new DevOps with the AWS Cloud Zero to Hero course starting from March 7th. It's an evening batch. The batch timings will be evening 7:30 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. IST. It's a regular batch, it's a live interactive online training with the recording access for 1.5 year. We will give access to the recordings also. The total training duration will be 6 months, and as part of this 6 months training, we are going to start discussing about various tools, full advanced way, project oriented, real time oriented concepts we'll try to discuss, and we'll make you interview ready, job ready with all the advanced tools, technologies like Istio, Argo CD, Docker, Kubernetes, Jenkins, GitHub Actions, Prometheus, Grafana, Elasticsearch, and cloud services like in AWS, various services like EKS, ECR, VPC, IAM, ELB, auto scaling, and again Linux and shell scripting, the foundation for a DevOps, and also version control systems like Git, GitHub, branching strategies, pull request, how to create a branches, how to merge the branches, merge conflicts, PRs, code review, and again security, DevSecOps related tools like SonarQube, Trivi, how to scan container images with the detailed project oriented, concept oriented, theoretical plus a practical hands-on training will be provided as part of this 6 months course. I will be the lead instructor and trainer for this batch. I am the only trainer in Rushi Technologies, the founder and trainer in Rushi Technologies. So if you wanted to know more details about the syllabus, right, here you can find the syllabus. More than 200 plus hours of extensive training, project oriented, real time oriented. With this training, you can easily compete with the person who already has a experience and DevOps, almost 5 years experience also. You can easily crack, easily compete with that person. For more detailed syllabus copy, you can check here. And if you wanted to enroll or reach out to me, you can message me on the WhatsApp numbers, or you can reach out to me on these numbers directly also. Okay. So these are the contact numbers. You guys can reach out to me. So for more detailed syllabus copy or a brochure, you can open this here. You can see all the detailed syllabus copy, what we are going to cover, what are the services we are offering as part of this curriculum, right? Course curriculum. It's more than 200 plus hours of training, extensive training. With this background, let's get into GitHub Actions. So in last session, we already discussed about the introduction. So we already discussed about the problem statement and introduction. So here, so here, GitHub Actions, as I already said in the last session, GitHub Actions is a CI/CD platform built directly inside GitHub repositories. So it will let you to run your workflows. Workflows are jobs, automated jobs. You can consider this workflows as a pipelines only. Your CI/CD pipelines. These workflows are nothing but a pipelines only. Right? So this GitHub Actions is a CI/CD automation platform directly built inside the Git repositories, and it will let you to run automated workflows, and it will help you to automate the task like building the code, compiling the code, running the test cases, creating an application packages. In case if you wanted to build and deploy your applications as a containers, it will allow you to create a container images, and you can push those artifacts that can be application artifacts or a container artifacts, right? And if required, you can deploy that into whatever environment, that can be virtualized deployments or a containerized deployments or Kubernetes clusters. Wherever you wanted to deploy, you can deploy. And you can automate, you can automate the continuous integration, continuous deployment of your applications. Otherwise, you can automate the infrastructure creation, infrastructure management also. Suppose you have a Terraform scripts and you wanted to provision the infrastructure, you can execute the Terraform scripts also using GitHub Actions. So basically, this GitHub Actions is like an automation engine, automation software, automation system inside the GitHub, where every automation is written in the form of YAML and executed automatically based on the events in the GitHub runners. So we discussed about all these things. What is runners in the previous session? If you missed the previous session, kindly go through that. Basically, if you are using GitHub Actions, you no need to set up any CA server, CD server, because GitHub only providing a runners. Runners are nothing but a machines where your workflow jobs, your pipeline jobs or workflow jobs will be executed. That servers will be called as a runners here in the GitHub Actions. That runners also like a managed runners from GitHub only. Otherwise, you can also register your own servers also as a runner, self-hosted runners. We discussed about that. And you no need to provision any servers to have a CA pipelines or CD pipelines to be executed. You no need to worry about the plugins. You no need to worry about availability, storage like that. So this GitHub Actions will allow you to build and deploy the code, run the unit test cases, check the code quality, code coverage, build a container images, and deploy those into your Kubernetes clusters or VMs or any other services. And again, it will allow you to send notifications also. This GitHub Actions built directly inside GitHub, no integrations needed. And again, you can quickly set up your CI/CD pipelines without creating any CI servers or a CD servers. So fast setup. And again, this GitHub Action supports all the programmatic languages like Java, Python, Node, Go, .NET. And again, using GitHub Actions, you can build and deploy your applications into a virtualized deployments or a virtual machines, or maybe you can build and deploy your applications as a containers into a Docker, or maybe you can deploy and manage into a container orchestration tools like Kubernetes also, right? So more than 200 plus actions are like a pre-built modules. Like if you are familiar with Jenkins, in Jenkins you have something called plugins or maybe shared libraries. Similar to that, in GitHub Actions we have something called actions. They are like a pre-built they are like a pre-built modules using that action, you can perform certain activity like checking out the code is also can be done using one action, or maybe installing required softwares like Java is also one type of action. There are so many pre-built actions from GitHub Marketplace. You can use those actions in your jobs for performing certain activity like cloning the code, like that, or pushing the artifact, like that. So here, this GitHub Actions supports so many runners, GitHub hosted runners, or maybe self-hosted runners. That GitHub hosted runners also supports multiple operating systems, as I already said, like Ubuntu, Windows, Mac, Linux. And again, if required, you can configure self-hosted runners, your own machines. You can register as a runner in GitHub, so that the GitHub will execute the workflow jobs, that pipelines or workflows in the your own servers also, that is registered as a runners in GitHub. Suppose you can use your own machines, your most own machines as a runners to run the jobs, like any Linux, Windows, Mac, on-prem, or maybe cloud servers also you can register. Or maybe you can have a container also as a runner, so that GitHub will execute the jobs in the your own runners also. That can runner can be a VM, or that can be a pod, that can be server in on-prem, or that can be a server in cloud, like that. So self-hosted runners you can use if you wanted to customize some kind of a configurations in that machines for building your applications, like that. So here in GitHub Actions, the most important one is workflow. Workflow. This is like your automation file. The way, suppose if you are familiar with Jenkins, you are going to define your automation in the Jenkins file. Jenkins file in the form of Groovy scripting, right? So here in GitHub Actions, you are going to define what jobs has to be executed, and in each job what tasks it has to perform. You are going to define in something called workflow. This is like one automation file, CI/CD automation file. So you can have this workflow in some predefined directory. So within your GitHub repository, under .github folder, under again workflows folder, you can have a file. That file name can be anything. So file name can be anything, but it's a YAML file. So this is like a main CI/CD automation file. What you wanted to perform using GitHub Actions, you will define in this workflow file. Workflow. So this workflow is basically a YAML file. This workflow is basically a YAML file that contains the logic, such as when the jobs in the workflow has to be executed, on what event, based on what event that jobs has to be executed, and which jobs to be executed. And again, in each job you are going to define a steps, and you can execute all these things via this GitHub using this workflow. So this workflow will be triggered. Workflow will have a jobs. That job will have a task like building, testing, creating image, pushing image, deploying into some system or container. That is like a job task. That a task can be defined in the jobs. The jobs will be defined in this workflow in the form of YAML file. But when this workflow jobs will be executed based on some events, like workflow will be executed whenever you are pushing, or whenever you are creating a pull request, or whenever you are creating a PR, whenever you are merging some branch, like that. So we will discuss about all these things, right? In your workflow you will have a jobs. That jobs will have a steps, and there is something called runners. This GitHub will execute those jobs. That GitHub will execute those pipeline or a jobs, whatever steps you have defined in the jobs. That jobs will be executed on the runners. The runners are nothing but a machine. That machine can be a GitHub managed runner or self-managed runner. So here job is nothing but a group of tasks that will be executed inside the same runner. So here, as I already told, a workflow can contain one or more jobs, and each job will be run parallelly. It is not sequentially. But suppose you wanted to execute some job after executing some other job, dependencies are there. That time you have to tell the GitHub Actions, I need to run this job before running other job, like that. You can define like that. So here jobs will have a steps. Steps are like a actual commands. Steps are like actual commands or actions executed inside the job. Like you know, this is also one step. Suppose you wanted to check out. Suppose you wanted to check out the code. This is also one step inside the job. And here we are using some predefined action, predefined actions like a plugin, like a marketplace from GitHub marketplace. Like we have some kind of a plugins. This is like a predefined action. It is going to check out the code like that. And again, this is one more step in the job where you are executing this command like that. So steps are actual commands or actions executed inside the job. We have multiple steps, maybe shell commands, or maybe you can perform certain activity for using actions, or you can define your custom actions also. But the job steps the job steps are a tasks basically here will be executed on some runner. That runner is a machine. That runner is a machine that is going to execute your GitHub actions jobs. As I already said, self-hosted runners, GitHub hosted runners, like that we have discussed. Now let me get into a sample GitHub workflow file. Suppose this is like one sample. I'm just starting with very fundamentals, basics. I'm not checking out any code as of now. I'm not building any application package. I'm not going to build any Docker image. I'm not pushing and deploying like that. So now we are understanding the concepts of GitHub Actions and components of your workflow file. So if you understand the concepts, then based on your requirements, you can create these GitHub Actions. You can implement a CI/CD pipelines using these GitHub Action workflows, right? So without understanding the concept, if you directly write something, it is not easy. So step by step, we are learning like what is workflow in GitHub, what is runners in GitHub, what is jobs, right? What is steps, what is actions, like that we are trying to learn. So this is one simple hello world kind of a workflow, right? So here we have some components. We'll discuss about this, right? So we have some components. Let's discuss about this. Here you can see there is a detailed documentation also about GitHub Actions. If you go to docs.github.com, if you go to this GitHub Docs, there is something called GitHub Actions. There is something called GitHub Actions here. So if you go to docs.github.com, there is some documentation about GitHub Actions also here. So GitHub Actions, you can automate, customize, execute your software development workflows uh, in your repository with GitHub Actions. So here, what is this GitHub Actions, right? So GitHub Actions is like a continuous integration and continuous delivery platform that will allow you to automate your build, your test, your deployment pipelines. So this is like a CI/CD platform only that will allow you to automate your build, test, and deployment pipeline. You can create a workflow. Workflows is like a pipelines only in the Jenkins. If you are familiar with Jenkins, this workflow is nothing but a pipeline. You can create a workflow that will run, that will be executed whenever you push some changes to your Git repository, or you can deploy, you can build, you can test whenever there is a push, whenever there is a merge, like that also. Here, basically, this is GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions. So here in this GitHub Actions, there is something called workflow. So there is something called workflow. As I already said, there is something called workflow. So you can configure GitHub Actions workflow. Workflow is like a pipeline only to be triggered. You can configure a GitHub Actions workflow to be triggered when event occurs in your Git repository. Event occurs in Git repository. But as I already said in the previous session, you can use GitHub Actions if you are using GitHub as your SCM repository. This GitHub Actions are tightly coupled with Git repositories, GitHub repositories basically. So you can't use this GitHub Actions workflow if you are maintaining your source code in a different SCM tools, like if you are using Bitbucket, or if you are using GitLab, or maybe if you are using something else, AWS code commit like that, that time you can't use this GitHub Actions to automate your workflows, your pipelines. But there is a different tools available also in the market as per that we already discussed. But now let's understand, most of the people are going to use GitHub as a source code repository. Without creating and managing separate CI/CD servers, you can use this GitHub Actions to automate build deployment like that. So here, as I already said, the most important component in this GitHub Actions is something called workflow. So this workflow is nothing but a pipeline. In that single workflow, you can have a multiple jobs, and each job will have a multiple steps, like a task. Like check out the code is one step, compiling the code is another step, creating a application package is one more step, maybe scanning the source code for identifying the security vulnerabilities is another step. In one job you can have a multiple step. Maybe you can have a one more job also in the same workflow, like one more job also in the same workflow. This is like maybe another steps in this job, right? Maybe here this is like your build job, this is like your test job, or maybe this is like your build job, this is like your deployment job. It is not mandatory that you have to have a multiple jobs. Maybe in single job also you can have your build steps, and again same job also you can have a deployment steps also. Otherwise your build steps in one job, your deployment steps in another job in the same workflow also you can define like that. So here GitHub Actions uses something called workflow to be triggered when these jobs will be triggered, when this workflow jobs, or when this workflow will be triggered, when some event happened, when some event happened in the Git repository. Suppose if you are familiar with Jenkins, right? You have created a Jenkins job. In that Jenkins job, you have some stages or steps like that. So that Jenkins will execute that job or a pipeline based on some triggers, that is build periodically, poll SEM, webhooks like that. Similarly, in GitHub Actions, this workflow will be executed based on some events in the Git repository. So that events like whenever you are pushing, whenever you are merging some branch, and based on cron expression also, we'll discuss about that. So when that event happened, GitHub will execute that workflow. In that workflow there is a jobs. In each job you can have a task, like building, testing, deploying like that. This is a understand conceptually what is this. Here, as I already said, this workflow, right, is basically one type of process. It's a automated process. Workflow is a configurable automated process. Workflow is a configurable automated process that will run one or more jobs. But where you can define workflows? Your workflows are defined by a YAML file that again checked into your Git repository. That again you can check into your Git repository, and it will be triggered. It will be triggered by an event in your repository, or that can be triggered manually also. Your workflow can be triggered by any event in the repository, like push, merge like that. Otherwise it can be triggered manually also whenever you need. Otherwise you can define a schedule. So the GitHub will execute that workflow based on the schedule also. These workflows are defined in this .github folder within your SCM repository under again workflows folder. So this workflow files, that pipelines, that workflow files or pipelines are defined in the .github folder workflows directory in a repository. And if required, you can have a multiple workflows also. If required, a repository can have a multiple workflows, and each of can perform different set of tasks also based on your requirement. So a repository can have multiple workflows. Each workflow can perform different set of tasks again. Maybe for one workflow file, you can have a build and test related jobs or tasks. In another workflow file also, if required, deployment related jobs and a task like that. Maybe in a single workflow also you can have a multiple jobs. In each job, different steps. Maybe in single workflow also you can have a two jobs, one for building, another one for deploying. Otherwise what you can do, maybe you can have a two different workflows. one workflow for building, another workflow for deploying, also like that. So you can have all those things, workflows. And there is something called events. Let's understand the concept of GitHub Actions first. Workflows, event is like a specific activity. Event is like a specific activity in your repository that is going to trigger a workflow. Like in Jenkins you have a webhook, build periodically, poll SCM, like that, right? So similarly here, event is basically a specific activity in your Git repository that is going to trigger a workflow. For example, someone created a pull request, PR, or maybe someone committed some code to the GitHub repository. So that time you can trigger a workflow. And as per the jobs and as per the steps defined in the workflow, it will perform certain activity like building, deploying, like that. Without you need to create a CI server, CD servers, this GitHub Actions will do on the runners, like that. So here, an event based on the events workflow will be triggered. If required, you can also configure to trigger a workflow based on the schedule also, or manually also you can trigger. So here there is a events that will trigger your workflow. Let me open that. There are so many events, like here branch, right? So push whenever there is a push, like whenever there is a push, right? Like this push, also whenever there is a PR created, whenever there is a fork, like that, there are so many events that it will support. So here, whenever there is a push also, again particular branch also, all these things they are explaining in the documentation. Suppose whenever they are creating some pull request also, and again here they are giving on means that workflow has to be executed on pull request, and again the type opened or reopened or closed, like that also. Like pull request, maybe push also, maybe someone is pushing the changes, right? Like this, there are so many events that can trigger your workflow based on your requirement. You can define. I will show you all these things also with some example. So here, and again, job is nothing but a set of steps. Job is nothing but a set of steps in a workflow that will be executed on a same runner. A job is nothing but a set of steps in a workflow that is executed on a same runner. Runner is nothing but a machine. That can be a GitHub hosted runner, or that can be a self-hosted runner. So each step is either a shell command that will be executed or an action that will be executed. That action like a predefined activity. Steps are again executed in order based on each, it is going to be executed in order or dependent on each other, like that. Again, if you have a multiple jobs in the same workflow, all those jobs will be parallelly executed, not sequentially, right? Like this, you can define the jobs. This there is something called action. We will discuss about actions also. An action is like a predefined, actions is like a predefined and reusable set of jobs or a code. Actions are like a predefined or reusable set of jobs or a code that will perform specific activity within your workflow. So these actions are like a predefined, like a plugins in Jenkins. You can think that way, like a shared libraries in the Jenkins, right? An action is like a predefined and reusable set of jobs or a code that will perform specific task within your workflow. And these actions will reduce the amount of repetitive code that you don't need to write. So maybe for pulling your Git repository from GitHub is also can be done using some action, or maybe uploading some artifact is also can be done using some action. Here, the workflow will have a jobs. The jobs will be having a steps. That step can be executing some shell command or performing certain action like cloning the code, uploading some package to the artifactory, like that. And GitHub is providing more than 20,000 plus actions. You can use from GitHub marketplace also, otherwise you can write your own action also. And there is something called runner. A runner is nothing but a server. A runner is nothing but a server, as I already said, that will run your workflows, or a jobs. that a runner is a server that runs your workflows when they are triggered. Each runner can each runner each runner can run a single job at a time. And GitHub provides Ubuntu, Linux, Microsoft, Windows, Mac OS runners to run your workflows, right? And each workflow run executes a fresh and newly provisioned machine. Whenever these workflows are getting triggered by the events, so GitHub will create one fresh VM. That runner is nothing but a VM. GitHub will create one fresh VM. They are going to manage in the background. They will create a fresh VM that the steps in the particular job will be executed on that VM. Then it will terminate that VM after that job is executed, like that. So GitHub offers so many runners, and if required, you can create your own runners also, like that. So this is what here. And here, if you see workflows, how to define a workflows, how to define a variables also, we'll try to understand. Now let me start with the basic things. One simple workflow. So as I already said here, this is one type of workflow. This is one type of workflow, right? In the form of YML. In that workflow, you will have a jobs. Each job will have a steps. These steps will be executed on the runner, and this workflow will be triggered based on events, like that. Here, just to give an example, this is like my workflow name. While creating a workflow, you can give a name. This is like a name of my workflow. You can give anything. This is like on means when this workflow has to be triggered. So this, as I already said, it will support so many, like based whenever you are pushing in any branch also you want a trigger, or whenever there is a push into particular branch also, you can mention like only in main branch this workflow has to be triggered, or maybe if it is any push in the other branches also it has to trigger, like that you can mention event. And again, on this event, this workflow will be executed. This workflow has a job. Just only one job I have defined. One job I have defined. This job has a task. This task can be a executing some simple shell command also, or it can be a using some action, predefined actions provided by GitHub. Like this is one action given by GitHub only. It is going to perform certain task, like a checking out the code to the runner, this runner, like that. And that can be executing. Like this, you can have a workflow. Now let me create one simple workflow, and let me explain one after the other. Let me explain one after the other. So here we will try to understand about this workflow concept. Workflow. In workflow, you can have a jobs. Each job can have a steps. That jobs, those steps of a particular job, all these steps of a particular job will be executed on some runner here, right? So here, simple rule, understand, workflow has a jobs have a steps, that steps will be executed on a runner. That runner is nothing but a machine that you no need to create. The GitHub will manage, that is a GitHub hosted runners, right? So this is a workflow, but where you have to create your workflow file, where you have to create your workflow file. So that workflow file in your GitHub repository, you should have in this .github folder, workflows folder, you can have that file. That workflow file contains the triggers, jobs, environment variables, like that, permissions, concurrency. There are so many sections. We'll discuss about one after the other. So here, this is one simple hello world example. Hello world example. But if you just let me tell you a simple, if you are already familiar with Jenkins, suppose you wanted to execute some pipeline, you need a server, but you need to create a Jenkins, you need to create a server, you need to install the Jenkins, you need to install plugins, and maybe you need to add an agents also if required. Then only that Jenkins pipeline will be executed. But here, GitHub GitHub Actions is like a fully managed, CI/CD platform by GitHub. So you just define what you wanted to perform, but the GitHub only will execute these steps, these jobs in the GitHub managed runners, like that. But as I already said, this GitHub Actions is not free. This GitHub Actions is not free. I told in the previous session. I have explained in the previous session. So here, if you are using GitHub for free, only 2000 minutes of execution, 2000 minutes of execution only free, and only 500 MB of the storage is free to store the artifacts. Whatever artifacts we may wanted to maintain in the GitHub artifactory, right? Only 500 MB size is free, and again only 2000 minutes of execution only free. But if you are using for real projects or a real production, maybe you are going to use GitHub Enterprise. So this GitHub Actions, if you are going with GitHub Enterprise, again there is no limits like only 2000 minutes execution time for per month. It is not like that. There is no limit, but GitHub, GitHub as a company, they are going to charge based on how many, based on how many workflows has been executed, and based on how each workflow, how much time it has executed, like that, it will charge. Right? The charges also important here. So that we have already discussed. Maybe if I go to my GitHub account, let me go to my GitHub account. This is my GitHub. Now, if I go to this here, if I go to this settings, if I go to this settings, here you can see billing and licensing, billing and licensing. If I go to overview, here actions, GitHub actions, actions. So only 2000 minutes free. 2 minutes means based on how much time the workflow has been executed. That steps are a pipeline. You can think of like a pipeline. Pipeline has a job. That workflow is like a pipeline that has a job. So how much time the jobs has been, how much time it has taken to execute that jobs per month. Only 2000 minutes is free. But if you are using enterprise, there is no free like that, and again only 500 GB storage is free for storing some kind of a artifacts, storing some kind of a artifacts. Only 500 MB, sorry, 500 MB of the artifact is only free. For now, learning environment fine, but in real time you may not use this GitHub for free, right? GitHub Enterprise you may use, right? So here, maybe if I go to this, so GitHub free you are using. But if you are not using GitHub free, you are using GitHub Enterprise, then we have some, there is no limits like that. But in GitHub free, 200 minutes per month, GitHub Actions, which means the amount of time your workflows has been executed, right? And 500 MB of the storage. GitHub also has some kind of inbuilt artifactory where you can store some artifacts like any type of files like jar, where those type of files also you can store, right? But if you want enterprise, maybe you need to upgrade. But upgrade means, if you see, there like a plan, like a different plans are there. But for now, I don't want any enterprise. Leave it. Now let me show you here. This is like one basic workflow. So here in your workflow, you can have a jobs. This is one job. That job will be the tasks of this job. You can see steps is like a task only. These tasks of that job will be executed on this, but this is a VM created by GitHub in the background. There, the steps will be executed like that. So that steps are nothing but the shell commands, or maybe some actions, this type of actions, or custom actions like that. Runners are nothing but machines that will execute your jobs. GitHub provides the machines for you. GitHub only provides the machines for you. Ubuntu machine, Windows machine, Mac machine like that. Otherwise, you can bring your own machines and you can use your own machines that can be in on-prem or a cloud also, and you can join these machines as a runners to the GitHub also, so that GitHub can run your jobs on your own runners also like that. So basically, at high level, workflow is like one automated process that will be executed based on the events happened on your repository. Events like push, PR, Maybe manual also you can trigger your workflow, or you can define a schedule also. And in your workflow you can have a job. Each job can have a multiple steps. All these steps will be executed on these runners, like that. So let me create a simple workflow file, so that you can understand. First workflow, I'm just creating one first workflow. First, maybe let me take one empty repository. Let me take one empty GitHub repository. Let me take one empty GitHub repository. Later, we will try to use for actual repos. Suppose, just to give an example, I already have some projects. Where I have used this GitHub Actions. If you see, this is my SCM repository with some source code, static web content. So here, I don't want to use Jenkins for CI/CD. If required, you can use GitHub Actions. Here you can see already in my Git repository, there is one folder called .github folder. Under that, I have a workflows folder. Under this, I have some YAML. You can think these like a workflows. These are like a workflows. You can have a single workflow, or you can have a multiple workflows. Again, from one workflow, you can trigger another workflow, like that. Here, just to give an example, this is my workflow, name of the workflow. And here, when this workflow has to be triggered, I mean to say the jobs in the workflow has to be triggered. So I am saying, whenever there is a push on which branch? Main branch. Whenever there is a push to the main branch, I want this workflow will be executed. And this workflow has a jobs. It has jobs. This is one job. This is one job, right? I have only one job here. In single job, I have a both the CI/CD both. This is one job. These are like a steps. These are like a steps. In your Jenkins file, you have a stages, like that, right? Like that. And these stages or steps will be executed on this runner. Like in your Jenkins, you have something called agents, right? Similar to that. So these steps will be executed on this runner. This is like a GitHub hosted runner. And these are like a environment variables or a variables. We'll discuss about this variables concept later. Now, in this step, you are checking out the code. You are pulling the code from your Git repositories to this workflow, that runner. Then you are trying to build a Docker image by executing this command. And first, you are authenticating with your Docker repository. You are building a Docker image. Then you are pushing the Docker image. Then you are deploying. Again, the way you have a SSH agent plugin, in GitHub, Jenkins, to remotely SSH and execute some commands there. Similarly, here also this action is like a same that type of plugin only. This is provided Git only. So using this action, right? You are trying to SSH to the Docker server. There you are executing some commands to create a containers, like that. Again, you wanted to send some kind of a notification. This is Slack notifications or email notifications also. But again, the way you have a plugins in Jenkins, right? Here, these are like actions, predefined actions. So after learning the basics, you will write these type of GitHub Actions workflow files also. Now, if I directly explain all these things, you don't understand. So that's why I'm going and explaining step by step. Also. Once you are comfortable with this GitHub workflows, jobs, runners, variables, secrets, actions, so that you can use this GitHub Actions as a CI/CD similar to the Jenkins. So if you are having multiple CI/CD tools knowledge, even though you already know Jenkins, maybe some applications or projects may use this GitHub Actions. So if you are comfortable with GitHub Actions also, then you have a more chances or more opportunities also, because if multiple tools also will add more weightage to your resume under the same category. And again, if you know GitHub Actions, as I already said in the previous session, so Azure DevOps also from Microsoft only. In Azure DevOps also, you are going to have a pipelines created the same way you are using GitHub Actions here. Suppose if you are using Azure DevOps CI pipeline, CD pipelines also in the form of YML only. So if you know GitHub Actions workflow YMLs, it is easy to again work with Azure DevOps CI pipeline, CD pipelines also. Right? Anyhow, This is just I'm just giving, like you can have a workflows here, and again maybe individually also you can have. I have a separate workflow for only building. In this only checking out the code, checking out the code, and building a Docker image, authenticating with the Docker repository, pushing. Maybe only this workflow, right? Like this. And again there is something called for deployment another workflow. But again, the way, if you are comfortable with Jenkins already, the way we have upstream downstream job, the way we have upstream downstream job. So here this is another workflow, but this workflow will be triggered when it has to be triggered. Maybe this can be triggered after triggering another workflow, like that, like upstream downstream. Suppose here, just to give an example, we will you will understand all these things at the end of this GitHub Actions training. At the end of this GitHub Actions training, you will understand all these things. Suppose if you see, this is my workflow name. This is my workflow name. Just to give an example, this is the name of the workflow. So this workflow has a job. This workflow has a job. The name of the job is build. The name of the job is build. Only one job. In this job you have a multiple steps, like checking out the code, authenticating with the Docker repository, building a container image, pushing the container image. But we will discuss about the secrets concepts in further sessions. We will discuss about the secrets concepts in further sessions. Using the secrets, you are hiding the confidential information. The way in Jenkins you have a credentials, you are creating a global credential secrets, and you are referring that secrets in your pipeline. Same way here, right? But where to create a secrets, I will discuss later. Okay, for now understand, this is one job. This is a job. That job has a steps, but this job will be executed by workflow. This workflow will be executed based on some events like this. Now then I have a one more workflow file. I have a one more workflow file, but here this will be executed when other workflow is executed, like that. So here this is a workflow run, like we have different events based on push, based on PR, based on other workflow. Suppose here I am using one more syntax, that this workflow is completed. When this workflow is successfully completed, then this workflow will be triggered. In this workflow I have some steps, that is only related to deployment. Again you can use conditions also. Again you can use this job. This job can be executed only if this condition satisfied, like conditionals also you can use. But at the end of this GitHub Actions training, you will understand workflow, jobs, triggers, events, variables, secrets, runners, all those things. But I just wanted to give an overview about what you are going to learn as part of this GitHub Actions training. And again, what you are going to learn as part of this GitHub Actions training, and how you can use this GitHub Actions for CI/CD. The way you are using Jenkins, without Jenkins also you can do this. Without creating and managing the CI server, CD servers also you can do this. Right? So that is what we will learn. So for now, I am just taking very simple application. I am not taking any application. I am creating a empty repository. I am going to create a empty repository. So let me go to my GitHub. This is a GitHub. So here, let me go and create one empty repository, GitHub repository. I'm just creating a repository. I am just saying hello, or maybe let's say hello world demo. Just I'm giving like this repo name. Maybe that can be a public repository or a private repository. That doesn't matter. That can be a public repository or a private repository. That doesn't matter. Okay. So again, let me create a repository. So now I will just maybe clone this into my local system, and I'll create a files. Otherwise here also you can directly do that. Here also you can directly do that without cloning also. But in real time, you are going to clone, you will write locally, you will commit locally or push like that. Suppose if required, here also I can click on create new file in this repository. So here folder, right? So folder dot GitHub, like this. After that, give forward slash like a folder. Again, one more folder, workflows, workflows folder, forward slash. If you give, it will come like that. Maybe let me show you if you are not able to do this way, right? Maybe this is my empty repository, right? Empty repository. I don't have anything. Maybe here also you can do like this. Create new file. Here folder, right? Dot GitHub forward slash. You type forward slash here. Again workflows. After that type forward slash. Now here you can give any name. This is like a workflow name. You can give any name. hello.yml or whatever, YAML or YML like that. So here you can write this way directly also, but most of the time you will not do like this. Most of the time you will not do like this. You will clone this repositories to your local system, and you are going to use some editors like a Visual Studio Code with some plugins also. GitHub Actions plugin also you can install in Visual Studio Code. GitHub Actions plugin also you can install in a Visual Studio Code also. GitHub Actions plugin you can install in Visual Studio Code. Also, you can do that. For now, if required, you can write like this also, like a name. This name is your workflow name. Your workflow name. Like in Jenkins, you are giving a pipeline name or a job name, right? So here I can give something like this also. Hello world workflow. Just something like this. This is your workflow name. This is your workflow name. Here in this workflow you can have something called on means when this workflow has to be triggered. When this workflow has to be triggered, here it is going to support so many. Here it is going to support so many. So here if you see the documentation, if you see the documentation, on push like that, on pull. If you see the documentation, events, workflows will be triggered based on the events. Workflows will be triggered based on the events. So there are so many events that occur in your repository, right? So if you see, there are so many events, right? There are so many events. So triggering a workflow, when that workflow will be triggered. So here there are so many events that supports, like on issue, on issues created in GitHub, on push like this, on push, on fork. Multiple events also you can define in as a array like this. Again, on push, but only all the branches or only any specific branch also you can do like this. You can define multiple events also, all these things. On push in this branch or this release branches or a feature branches also you can do. But if I don't mention like this branches, only if I say on push, then irrespective in which branch there is a push happened, the workflow will be triggered. The workflow will be triggered. Like this, there are so many. There are so many, right? It is going to support. There are so many. It is going to support. In the documentation of our GitHub Actions, also I am going to give on push branches main or workflow dispatch. If I give workflow dispatch means it is going to run manually. You need to manually trigger the event. You need to manually trigger the pipeline, that workflow. Suppose here you can write like this also, like this workflow dispatch, like this workflow dispatch. So this workflow dispatch, if you define like this, manually, manually you have to run, manually you have to run, it will be triggered manually, not on push like that, not on push like that. You can define, maybe here itself you can write like this, but most of the time you will not write like this. Again, here you have something called jobs. Here you have something called jobs. You can have a single job or a multiple job. If you see this example, if you see this example, like jobs, this is one job, but that job has to be executed on what? Runner is nothing but a machine. Runner is nothing but a machine. Like that you can write. So maybe I am just writing it. YML here itself. This is not recommended. Maybe I will just cancel. I will not do anything. So what I will do, this is empty repository, or maybe it can be existing repository also. Maybe suppose you already have a code. Let me take one more application. Maybe this is your Java based web application. This is Java based web application. But here I have not used GitHub Actions. Here you don't see any folder like .github that workflows like that. Maybe you wanted to implement a CI/CD for this application using GitHub Action. Maybe already have so much source code. You can clone this. You can create a .github folder, and you can create a workflows folder. In that you can define a workflow file. In that workflow file, you can define your jobs with the steps and actions like that. So for now I'm just creating one empty repository. I have already created one empty GitHub repository. I have just created one empty GitHub repository. This is like hello world demo. Hello world demo. Now I will clone this. Maybe if you as a developer, as a DevOps guy, you download Visual Studio Code Editor. In this Visual Studio Code Editor also you can directly clone. Here there are some shortcuts. You can clone. Here you can see there is an options like Git related options here, right? You can click on this. Already I am into this repository. Maybe what you can do, let me close this. There is a one more shortcut here in the search bar, here in the top, right? You can search with git clone like that also. Otherwise you can go to your command prompt and clone. Here type greater than symbol, you type git clone. You can see git clone like that. You may see option. So if you give here, it will provide, it is asking you to give a URL. So this is my git URL. I can clone like this. In the background, this is like a git clone command only. This is like a git clone command only. So in whatever folder you wanted to clone within your laptop or desktop, you can select maybe like this. Under this, it will clone. And it is asking, I have cloned, whether you wanted to open this in a new window. Yes. So now it is empty. So if you don't know this one, maybe if you don't know how to use this VS Code, Git, this type of things, maybe you can follow normal Git clone. But once you clone, you can go to file, open folder like that also you can do. Maybe if you don't know how to clone, maybe you use Git bash or maybe command prompt. You go and go to some folder and download clone in that folder and open like that also you can do. So for now I have just cloned directly via GitHub. And here let's say I don't have any files. Here I will create one file. First let me create a folder. The folder name is .github. Again select this. Under this again, this is like a creating a folder, new folder. Again under this I am going to create a folder exactly with this name you have to have. So GitHub will only look into this .github workflows folder for workflows files. Workflows folder. Under this, I'll create one file. File name can be anything. I'm just saying hello.yaml. This is my workflow file. Now here you can write a code. But if you wanted to improve your productivity, you can use some AI tools like ChatGPT, or maybe you can use maybe this GitHub Copilot also to ask something. Otherwise, here you go to your Visual Studio Code extensions. Go to extensions. You can install something called Git Actions. GitHub Actions basically. GitHub Actions like that you search. So here there is one VS Code extension given by GitHub only. So you install this GitHub Actions Visual Studio Code extension. So it is going to do some kind of a syntax validation when you are writing. It is going to suggest also. You can install this. It is going to suggest. It will help you. This GitHub Actions extension of VS Code will let you to manage your workflows, view the workflows, and help you. Like it will help you to write some code, syntax highlighting, validating some mistakes if you are doing also, it will highlight. I have already installed. If required, you can install. Now let me start here. First file, I am just giving name. So now why it is giving something like this, right? Because I have installed that GitHub extension, GitHub extensions VS Code plugin. So it is suggesting like a name. So I can give some name. Let's say I'm just giving hello world workflow. So here there is something called when on. So based on multiple also array, whenever there is a push or whenever there is a pull request also, this workflow has to be executed like that also you can define. Otherwise single also you can do. Maybe here also you can say push on indentation, right? On push. Suppose if I just say on push without giving anything, without giving anything, suppose here it is still throwing errors because the jobs is like a required field I have not defined. So when this has to be triggered, so push. Here most important one is jobs. Most important one is jobs. Jobs. So jobs. So I'm just giving job name anything. I can give anything, but like hello world job. So here this is my job name. You can give anything also here. Job name can be anything. A B C X Y Z also. A B C X Y Z also you can give like a build or deploy like that. This is your job name. Like you, I'm just giving hello world job, and this job will have a step. Maybe you can have a one step or a multiple steps. So this is one step. I'm just having one more step also. I'm just executing some command. This is one more step, but indentation is important, so that's why I'm using this, right? So this is one step. This is like a name of the step. This is like a name of the step. And here you can use run means running some command, running some command. But these commands, these steps will be executed on this runner. This is going to create one fresh VM. GitHub only will create a VM using Ubuntu. And these commands or these steps of the job will be executed in this VM. Once this job is executed, it will terminate. GitHub will terminate the VM. So you are not creating a CI server, you are not creating a CI agents. GitHub is going to take care. That is what fully managed CI/CD platform. This GitHub Actions is like a fully managed CI/CD platform. So like this, you can have a multiple steps. This is one step. This is another step, like that. And here I have just given on push like that. I have just given on push, on push. But maybe in this repository, whether you have a development branch, main branch, feature branch, in whatever branch you are committing, this workflow will be executed. This workflow file will be executed. This workflow file will be executed. But as of now, I have only one branch, that is main branch. And in the main branch only, I'm just committing this workflow file also. But if you have multiple branches and whatever branch you have a commit also, that time it will be executed. Otherwise, if you wanted to limit also, I have so many branches. But whenever there is a push on the main branch only, I have to execute under this push branches like that, you can see. But understand the concept. But everything is there in the documentation. You can go and see GitHub Actions documentation. GitHub Actions documentation. So here, if you don't know also, GitHub Actions, you can search GitHub Actions on events, on events, like that. So events that will trigger your workflow. So GitHub Actions workflows are triggered by events, which are specific activities in your repository, such as push to a branch, pull request being created, or manual trigger like that. So push, pull request, schedule, workflow dispatch. Manually, workflow dispatch means manually you can trigger also. And whenever a software release is being created, like that, you can see this type of syntax. Push any one event also. Suppose if required, you can do like this. This is one event. This is another event. Either this event happened in your repository. Suppose when there is a PR created for main branch also, that time also it will trigger. Whenever there is a push also triggered. So if you have a multiple events also, any one of the event is also happening, it will trigger that workflow like that. Here there is a detailed documentation. Event that triggers workflows. Event that triggers workflows. So this is also one type of event in your, suppose we have created some branch protection rule. We have created one branch, you have created some branch protections rules in the GitHub. Whenever you are deleting a branch protection rule, whenever you are creating a branch protection rule, and whenever you are editing the branch protection rule also, that workflow will be triggered. But it is going to last commit from the default branch, it will check out. If you say check out, it will take the last commit from the default branch, it will check out, and it will try to do whatever you would like to do. This is one event, branch protection rule, when it is created, deleted, like that. Otherwise, not only branch protection rule, like there are so many, right? Whenever there is a push, there is a pull, like that, there are so many. But the most important and widely used here is on push, on pull, on PR created, like a that PR created, or maybe on schedule, or maybe on another workflow trigger. Suppose based on another workflow, like as I already shown in my code, right? One workflow can trigger another workflow. Those are like a common things, but most all are here. You can see what options can be used, like this, when pull request created. Again, pull request, within that pull request, any, when pull request is opened, when you wanted to trigger, or pull request is closed at the time you wanted to trigger this workflow, or when pull request is assigned, you wanted to trigger workflow, like that you can mention. So here syntax is like this: on pull request, types are opened, reopened, assigned, like that. Whenever a pull request is created, type opened or reopened, closed, that time it has to trigger, like that also you can say. Again, like this, again, pull request, whenever there is a PR created, from which branch, if the PR is created, that time also you wanted to trigger. Like all these things are like a, you can trigger based on all these things: pull request, or push, or workflow dispatch means manually you wanted to trigger that, like that. And maybe on push, like that. Everything is here only, everything is documented here only, but understanding the concept is important. Otherwise you can use something like this: a schedule. This is like a cron expression. Suppose here either push, or maybe you can use multiple also. This is like a schedule. So this schedule, daily midnight 12 o'clock. Otherwise, like every 5 minutes, or maybe every 5 minutes, like every 5 minutes, you wanted to trigger, right? So this is going to trigger every 5 minutes, like this. Every 5 minutes, it is going to just a trigger, like 0 by 5. You already know cron expression. Either for this event also the workflow will be triggered, this event also workflow will be triggered. Suppose if I don't give branches like this, that can be push happen in any branch also, it can trigger. Otherwise you can specify on this branch, maybe you have something called features star means after that anything. You have so many feature branches, maybe you have a release branches and a development branch, like that also you can define. This is push. Similarly, maybe you wanted to do on a pull request also, like this. Again, pull request from these branches. Again, pull request from these branches. Again, when it is activity type, actions means whether pull request is opened, or whenever there's a PR opened, you wanted to create, like this. All these things you can define. Here you can see PR, pull request. Whenever there is a pull request, right? Pull request types, pull request types opened. Here types opened. Whenever there is a PR opened for these branches, maybe especially maybe release branch and main branch, if there is a PR opened, Like that also you can define multiple like this. But if I don't give these branches, a PR opened on any branch, that workflow will be triggered like that. So based on your requirement, you can define these events. So these jobs in the workflow, I mean, say this workflow will be executed when on these events. That can be a schedule, that can be a push, that can be a pull request, like that. In workflow, you have a jobs, one job or more job. Each job have a multiple steps. These steps will, these jobs will be, these steps of the jobs will be executed on these runners like that. For now, let me remove all these things. I will just keep it only like workflow dispatch. This is like a manually also I can run, manually also I can run. Otherwise you can say push and push, like that. Manual also you can run, or push also you can run. This will be executed. This is my file. Now let me commit this file. Let me commit this to my local repo. Later I will push. Now if I go to my GitHub repo, this repo, here you can see this is my GitHub repo. I don't have any files, empty files as of now. If I see here, there is something called actions. This is where you can see your execution, your workflow execution. If I go to this actions, as of now I don't have anything. From here also you can create, from here also you can create simple workflow. Since I don't have, in the GitHub also it is showing configure, but I am not configuring from here. I'll just clone my code. I am committing, I am pushing. Now if here itself you can see, if you are familiar with this Visual Studio Code, here also you can use. Otherwise you can use git commands. You can go to, even go to this folder, you can go to your terminal. So here I have this dot github, and under that I have, this is my project. Here also you can execute git add, git commit, git push, all those things. But here if you are familiar with this, here also you can see, right? Here also you can see, here add, add from working area to the staging area. Then you can commit also, you can commit with commit message. I am giving a message created GitHub Actions workflow. This is like your commit message, GitHub Actions workflow. But I don't have any source code for now. Fine. GitHub Actions workflow. GitHub Actions workflow. Either you can commit and push, but I already configured my GitHub personal access token, so it is not asking me to give that. I'm committing and pushing. Now, if you see here, I have given already on this. Now, this file is also part of that repository. Now, if I go back to this actions, if I come back here, you may see already one time it is executed. One time it is executed. This is my Git repository. Now I have committed, and that also I have pushed. I have committed and pushed. This is my, what is that repo? Hello world demo. So in this repo, I have committed this. Local I have committed, later I have pushed. And in this workflow file, I have given on push also, push to the main branch. This is my main branch. This file is also pushed. That is also one type of push only. Now if I go to this Git repo, GitHub repo, if I go to actions, you can see there is one workflow. This is my name of the workflow. That YAML file I have, in the YAML file I have given name, right? Hello world workflow, only single workflow. That workflow has executed once. That workflow has executed once. This is my commit message. This is my commit message. Now if I go to this, if I see this again, click this, you can see logs. You can see logs also. So it has taken total 7 seconds to execute that jobs in that workflow. And here let me click this. Here you can see like a setup job, setup job. So first it is just creating a runner. Runner means a machine. GitHub only internally creating one VM. GitHub only internally creating one VM. It is using that Ubuntu, because I have told, right, Ubuntu latest, like that. It has created one VM. It has that VM with the Ubuntu OS. It has created this, like a setup job. This is like a setup job. This is like a setup job. It has downloaded, I would say it has created one VM. Then this is my step. This is my step. This is my job name. This is my job name. In order to run the steps in that job, it has created one runner. And again, this is my step. Hello echo world. You can see output also. Again, I have a one more step also. The step name is another step like that. Another step like that I have given. So this is another step in the workflow like that. So like this, you can define the steps. Maybe again, let me modify here. I'm just giving one more name. I'm just saying. So here, display date. But as of now, let's say I'm executing ls-la list files like that, like a multiple steps, multiple commands. So here, let me tell you who am I. Like that, I'm just executing some steps. Again, let me commit. But I don't have any source files. I don't have any source files. Let me commit. Since I have given on push this one, it will trigger. Right, again, one more time. Here, again, I will add from working area to the staging area. Updated my workflow jobs, workflow steps. This is my commit message. Let me push, commit and push. Now, if you see again one more time, if I go back to this actions, you can see again it is getting triggered. Now it is triggered second time. Second time it is getting triggered. Now here you can see this is my job. In this workflow, this is my job, only one job. In this job, total I have so many steps. You can see hello world step, step 2, display date, list files, show current directory, who am I, like that. These are my actual steps that I have defined in my job. This is setup job, complete job. GitHub actions are taking care. GitHub is taking care. In this setup job, first what it is doing, in this setup job, what it is doing, first it is trying to create one machine, a VM with Ubuntu OS. Because in order to run these steps of the job, it needs some VM. That is a GitHub hosted VM, GitHub hosted runner, right? So these steps to be executed, it is creating one machine that is called runner, GitHub hosted runner with Ubuntu. Now that is done. After that, this is the name of my step in that job. Hello world step. Here I have just used echo hello world like that. But you can see this is getting executed. Again, this is the name of my step, step 2. But this is the command. You can see this is another step in the workflow like that. You can see output. Again, I have used a display date as a step name, but the date command, you can see this is the date. List files. You don't see any files. You don't see any files. You don't see any files. Right? I will tell you, in order to check out, you need to define something. Even though you have some files in the SCM repository, even though you will maintain some files in the SCM repository, that will not be cloned to your workflow runner, right? Suppose I will explain another concept called actions. That time you will understand. But now you don't see any files, nothing. And in which directory? This is the current directory. But this is home runner workflow. This is our repo name. This is like a subfolder like that. But here, these machines we are not creating. GitHub only doing that. And again, who am I? It is saying username as a runner. The name of the user is runner only. Like that, you have a multiple steps in the same job. Similarly, if required, you can have a multiple jobs also in a same workflow. In the same workflow, you can have a multiple jobs. The way I have one job, similarly, you can have a one more job. If required, you can directly edit here also, guys. If required, directly here also you can edit. Directly here also you can edit. But I don't recommend this. Otherwise, there is a one more approach also. Here there is something called instead of github.com, you can use github.dev. It is going to open VS Code in the browser itself. GitHub instead of .com, if you give github.dev, right, it will open VS Code browser. In the browser itself, VS Code, Visual Studio Code, because VS Code web-based VS Code. This is like a web-based VS Code. This is like a web-based VS Code. Web-based VS Code. VS Code also from Microsoft. GitHub also from Microsoft. So this is like a web-based VS Code, not your local VS Code. So here also maybe you can modify, you can commit also some changes. But we don't use all these things typically. I'm just giving just explaining. Maybe let's say I'm just giving one more thing here. This is directly you can do like this also. Run. I wanted to run. Maybe you can df-kh disk usage like that. I can make the changes. I can save here, and here also you can see same options, commit like that. But this is not your local VS Code. This is not your local VS Code. This is like a browser based VS Code, right? Here also you can do. But already you logged in. Already you logged into your GitHub in this browser, GitHub, right? So that username password it will use. Updated workflow step. Updated workflow step. Commit and push like that. This is browser based VS Code. Now again maybe let me go and open here actions. In one more, just github.com. Let me open actions. Now you can see one more time. One more time also this is create executed. Now here I have added one more step. Check disk usage like a step in that job. So this is the server disk usage, but we are not creating a server. GitHub only creating a server that is called a GitHub hosted runner. There all these steps are being executed. Like this you can use all these things also, or maybe you can directly edit also like this. Maybe here you can go to that file. Here you can edit, normal edit also you can do, but we are not going to do all these things. Most of the time you will clone locally, you will modify. Maybe here also you can remove whatever you would like to remove, add. Here also you can commit. Now again, if I go to the actions, again this is getting triggered because I have given an event push event like that. Now you can see again it is triggered with only this one, that I have removed that step called a check disk usage like that. Now let me tell you, I will write locally only. Let me pull in my local. I will pull again. So here you can use all these things also. Git pull here like this, or maybe here if you are comfortable with commands, you can do like this also. Git pull the latest changes. Now let's say let me go to my again files, right? Maybe if required, let me show one more job. This is one job. Let's say one more job I am giving. Like here, indentation also important. This is another job. So here job name I will give. Let me give this. One more job. I will say job 2. I'm just giving job 2. Like job 2. Not jobs, just I'm just giving hello world job. Like this is like a job 1. Or I can just say maybe hello world build. Let's say here hello world test like that. Anything. But you cannot have a two jobs with same name. Again I can't have like this. Again I can't have a one more job in the same workflow. In the same workflow, understand, this is again very important. In the same workflow, in the same workflow, this is your workflow file. This is your workflow. In the same workflow you cannot have a two jobs with same name, right? Two jobs with the same name. So this is not going to allow also. It will throw error if you do also. Let's say I'm just saying hello world test job like that. Again, this job indentation also important. Let me show you one more line. Now if I give same name again, it will throw error, because here already defined unique value should be there, right? You can't use like this. So I'm just saying hello world test like this. This is one more job. Again, this job also can have a steps. This job also can have a steps. This job also can have a steps, multiple steps. This is just this is the step, step in the hello world test job like this. Or maybe let's say one more. You can have a multiple steps also here. This is one more name. I'm just saying step 2 in the test job like that. Like this, I'm just giving. Again, understand here, if I have a multiple jobs in the same workflow, it is not going to execute sequentially. It is not like the GitHub will execute first this job. This job means all the steps in this job. It is not going to execute first this job. After that, this job like that. So this job and this job will be executed parallelly. Parallelly by default. By default, parallel it will be executed, not sequentially. Not sequentially. So let me tell you, let me commit this. Let me commit this. Updated my workflow to have two jobs. This is my commit message. I am adding from working area to the staging area, commit and push. Now here, if I go to this actions, now on push also event triggered. Now you can see this is my commit message, and this is being executed. Now you can see I have two jobs. But if you see this and this not sequentially executed, parallelly only executed, like parallelly only executed. I have two jobs. In this job, in the workflow, in that workflow, this is one job. In this job, these steps. This is another job. This is another job. These steps executed, but not sequentially. Parallelly, it is executed by default. But if required, you have a requirement. Maybe you have a build job. You have a test job. After executing build job only, you have to execute a test job. Maybe you can have in one job also, you can have all the steps, building, deploying also in a same. Also you can define building commands, deploying commands also can be defined in a single job also. But let's imagine you have segregated build job separately, test job separately, like that you have segregated. But if you wanted to execute a test job after build job is executed, so that time you are going to use some keywords again here. There is something called needs. There is something called needs in GitHub action. Needs is like a depends, like it depends like that. So needs keyword in GitHub actions used to control the execution order of your jobs. Needs is a keyword in GitHub actions is used to control the execution of order of jobs within a workflow by splitting explicit dependencies. A job specified in the need section will not run until all the other jobs are executed like that. Suppose if you say like this, so this is one job, this is one job, this is another job, this is one more job, three jobs, right? Now here in this job you are saying needs a build. So what does it mean, right? So this job will not be executed parallelly, right? This job will be executed after executing this build job. This is like name, job name. You are saying needs a build means this is name of the job, like that. So here deploy job will be needs these two jobs, but don't create a cyclic dependency. Cyclic dependency means let me tell you that time deadlock situation will happen. Suppose here you are saying in this hello world job, you are saying needs in this hello world test job, in this hello world test job, you are saying needs on hello world job, which means now this job this job will be executed only after completing this job. This is like a name of the job. Cyclic dependencies are a deadlock means again you are saying here needs needs on this one. This is going to be a problem. It is going to wait like this completely. since we are having since we are having that plugin, it is throwing error. This is not correct like that. Why it is not correct? You are saying this job needs this job to be executed, but again in this job you are saying this job to be executed. So there is a cyclic dependency deadlock situation. So GitHub don't know. You are saying in order to execute this job has to be executed, but again in the above job, again you are saying in order to execute this job you need this job like that. So this is called as a cyclic dependency, right? So don't define that type of cyclic dependency. Now here, this is one job, this is another job. Now here I have said needs this one. This is like a name of this job. Now this job, this a test hello world test job will not be executed unless until this job is completed, like that. Like this you can use needs on. Maybe if required multiple also, maybe you have a one more job. Let me define order, doesn't matter again. Even though in the bar below you have defined order also, no problem. Maybe let's say one more job I will define. I am just giving deploy job, like that. The name is deploy job, like that. Again here, for this one also you are saying this job has to be executed after completing this job. But here you can say multiple also. This has to be executed when both are executed, like this also. Again this name, like this also you can use. So now this job will be executed upon completing this job and this job, not sequentially now, based on your requirement you can define. Maybe if this job is not request this job to be executed, maybe you can remove and give single also. Like this is like array syntax, single value, array multiple values also you can give, like this. Single value, multiple value also, or multiple also you can define. This is like a needs on. But for this one I have not defined anything. But for this deploy job will be executed upon this job is executed, and again this hello world test job also will be executed upon this job executed. Otherwise maybe you can say maybe after deploy job I wanted to execute like this also, you can do like this. So this is like a, you can control the dependencies. Like one job has to be executed after particular job, you can use this needs on, like that. So let me commit these changes. Now if I go to this my GitHub repository, if I go to that actions, again you may see this is being triggered. Now you can see order. Like first this is executed, after that this is executed, finally this is executed as per that configuration. So first this hello world job is executed, after that deploy job is executed. This deploy job is depends on this job. That's what we have mentioned. This deploy job is needs this hello world job. This tester job needs this deploy job, like that. Like it is, you can see in the order also it is executed like this. So you can go to this, you can see first this is executed, this is executed, this is executed. Otherwise let me tell you, maybe here instead of deploy job, maybe here if I say this job also, again I am modifying this test job needs this one, like that. Let me show you, it will be little different. Now if I go to this, let me go back to my workflow. I have only one workflow. Now again this workflow being triggered, now you can see this job executed, but these two parallelly executed after completing this hello world job. This deploy job is executed, or this hello world job also executed parallelly. these two jobs got executed parallelly after completing this job. Suppose if I remove this needs here and here, now all these three jobs, two jobs, whatever, how many jobs you have in the workflow, all will be executed parallelly. Let me show that. And again, everyone is using GitHub for free for learning this GitHub Actions. That 2000 minutes execution minutes per month is sufficient. Maybe if you exhausted 2000 minutes per month, maybe you can wait for next month. Again, in the next month, again you will get a 2000 minutes for free for learning practicing. Now again, if you see, one more time it is triggered. This time it is not parallelly, it is no, sorry, it is not sequentially, it is parallel, all these three individually executed like that. But sometimes you are creating one package. Sometimes I will tell you why all these things I am explaining also basics. Suppose let's say you have one workflow, you have one workflow you have one workflow, you wanted to build a package and you wanted to deploy a package, and the build job is different, deploy job is different. Suppose the build job and deploy jobs are parallelly getting executed, the deploy job may fail because you don't have a package that has to be deployed. So maybe you can have a jobs, in one job you can build your package like jar var docker image like that, and you can push that. In another job you can deploy that package maybe, but before executing the build job you don't want to execute the deploy job. That time you can use this needs on, this deploy job needs on build job like that. Otherwise if you don't define parallel, if it execute, your workflow jobs may fail. That is how that needs works. Now let's imagine, suppose I wanted to run multiple commands. So here each command you are defining multiple steps, each command require defining multiple steps. Maybe sometimes I may want to execute so many commands. I don't want to have very lengthy pipeline, lengthy workflow. Suppose with single step also, with single step also you can run multiple commands. With single step also you can run multiple commands. Here in my GitHub Actions notes, in my GitHub Actions notes, I am trying to explain all these things also. So we just discussed about this one only. You can open VS Code in the GitHub also directly using this github.dev, replacing that .com with the .dev like that also. Otherwise, you can locally also use VS Code. You will download VS Code in your laptop, open VS Code, go to extensions and install Git Actions extension. Then you can write a jobs like this. You can write a job workflow based on push, right? This is your workflow name. You can give anything. This is another workflow. If required, you can have a multiple workflows also in the same repo, but all workflows will be executed based on that events. Suppose if you have a multiple workflow, suppose if you have a multiple workflow, based on the events happen, another workflow also will be multiple workflows also will be executed. Another workflow means another file. Just to give an example here, the way I have a allo.yaml, let's say I'm saying one more file, test.yaml, test.yaml. So this is another workflow. Here I can give some name. This is like a test workflow. And again here also if I say on push like this, so this workflow also will be executed whenever you are pushing, and this workflow also will be executed whenever you are pushing like that. Maybe here instead of on push, I am just saying workflow dispatch. This is like a manually only, whenever you are manually only trigger. And again here you can have jobs. This is like a just one more job like this. Like this, you have a job with multiple steps. So understand, in you can have multiple workflows also. This is one workflow, this is another workflow. This workflow also will be executed, this workflow will be executed based on the events. In this workflow file I have given events, maybe when it has to be executed, whenever there is a push to the main branch, and also manual also I can trigger. Otherwise here I have not given on push, only workflow dispatch means this is like a manual, this is like a manual only, like this. If I give here also, here again push, both workflows will be executed like that. Let me show that. Now I have two workflows files. Now if I go to my GitHub repo, if I go to actions, here you can see, here you can see this is one workflow, this is another workflow, because I have a two files right here. So in one workflow, the name is test workflow, another hello world workflow, another test workflow. Both workflows got executed because I have both, on both workflow I have defined on push like that. So whenever I have pushed, both got executed. Here you can see. In this workflow, I have some jobs. In this workflow, I have some jobs. So here, let's go and execute. Let's go and check this. Now in this workflow, I have three jobs. Three jobs. All these three jobs got executed in this execution. Right. Similarly, let me go back to all jobs. Let me go back to this this workflows. This is test workflow. This is also executed with its own. This is just having its own one job that is got executed, the steps of this job like that. So here, if you required, maybe you can have a multiple workflows also, but that depends on your requirement. Most of the time you will have a single workflow, or maybe even though you have a multiple workflow, maybe one workflow you will trigger based on another workflow. Now I am just removing on push. I am removing on push, right? Just I am just keeping like this. Now whenever we commit, this workflow will not be executed. Only manually you have to trigger. Like this also you can do. Now I have committed. Now I have a two workflows. Now if I go to GitHub Actions, you can see this one, hello world workflow. If you go, how many times this is executed, you can see. Now just now also it is executed. Just now also it is executed. Right? Your commit message also you can see. Just now also it is executed. But now let me go back to all workflows. This test workflow is not executed. If I commit also, any changes, if I commit also here, maybe I have some file, maybe I'll commit, or maybe let me change something here. Let's say again I'm making some changes and I'm committing. This is also one type of commit only, push only. I'm committing and pushing. Only this is going to be executed, but other workflow where I have just given workflow dispatch not on push, that is not going to be executed. Now if I go back to this actions, here this is getting going to be executed. You can see this is executed. You can see how many times, 11 times, right? This is executed. For this commit also like that. For this commit, this is executed like that also, you can see. But if I see this test workflow, it is not executed because I have just only workflow dispatch. So here manually you can run here, run workflow like that. You can see in this workflows section, all workflows, here you can see this test workflow, you can see run workflow like that. So this is like a manual run. Manually you are triggering the job, that workflow. Manually you are triggering. Now manually you are triggering. Now you can see this is getting manually triggered like this. This is how you can manually also trigger. Otherwise, one job can trigger another job also. That one workflow can trigger another workflow, that we will discuss in further sessions. But now let's come back to this concept. Let's come back to this concept. Maybe in any workflow, let's say you have some commands, but this is one command, this is one command, this is another command, like that. I don't want to define all these commands into a multiple steps. In single step I wanted to execute multiple commands. That is also possible here. That is also possible here. If you see the GitHub notes, this notes, whatever I have documented here. So here, if required, you can have a multiple also with the pipe separator. Pipe separator. I mean, say you can have something like this. You can have something like this, right? Like a multiple commands also. You can have a pipe with single run, multiple also you can define. So let me show that. Let me show that. Since it's a Linux environment, Ubuntu, that runner is a Linux runner, right? Ubuntu means basically it is going to create one VM. In that VM, these steps will be executed, these commands. So here you can use all that Linux related pipe commands, string manipulations, this piping, redirection, IO redirection, piping, all those things also you can do. But again, instead of defining in multiple, also in a single step, also you can use pipe this thing, and you can define multiple commands. This is YML concept, right? Multi-line strings like that, if you remember. Suppose here, maybe what I can do, I can use something like this also. This is one command. Similarly, this also I can define with single run. This is also like multiple commands can be executed together also like this in a single step. Only one step with the multiple commands. And again, let's say here you can use all these things. Piping hello.txt file. This output I'm just appending to one file. After this ls-la, I should see this file. If required, maybe you can do something like this also. Cat and this hello world. In the runner, it will create a file. In this runner, it will create a file. Like this, you can have a multiple commands also in one step. Maybe another step, maybe whatever. This is one more step. Maybe with single command also you can run single command like this, or maybe multiple commands like this run pipe, like a multi-line string. Maybe if required, you can write like this also. Now let me remove additional jobs, whatever I have already explained. Maybe if you want, you can keep it. Otherwise, again here also maybe in single or multiple also based on your requirement. So here let's say pipe, like you can have commands like this, multiple commands in a single step. The name of the step you can give anything like this. So like this you can define, so that the number of lines of your pipeline will be reduced, so that it is easy to understand also. It is easy to, but related you can define like this. So let me save this. Let me run this also. It should work. Maybe this I am making a changes like this. Updated workflow job to combine multiple commands. Now let me go and see. This is again, if I go to actions in my repo, wherever, think, hello world demo. If I go to my actions, here, now you can see this workflow got executed. That test this hello world workflow, because on push I have defined this. But here you can see in this hello world job, I have only two steps. hello world step, additional step. In this hello world step, I have combined multiple commands. All these commands also you can see. Hello world, date, ls-lar, all those things, right? PWD, like all these things also. Here you can see this one file also is there. Like this, all these things you can see. You can run, you can combine multiple commands like this also. Maybe if you see this type of syntax, don't get confused. Don't get confused. Now, but even though you are having a workflow, maybe let's say I have some source code here. Maybe this is my GitHub flow, but let's say I have some files here. Let me close this. Let me select this main folder. So let's say here I'm just creating one file, just demo.sh file, or maybe something, something, some file that can be a Java file, source code files, or maybe some shell scripts. Maybe let's imagine I have some files, index.html, let's say static web content, demo.html, or demo.sh. Let's say this is on some shell script that you are writing. This is demo script. Something. Maybe if required, you can run the script also. You can run the script also via that workflow, right? But let's say I have a script here. Maybe I have some file here. That doesn't matter. But this will not be cloned by default. This will not be cloned by default by this GitHub Actions, right? So unless until you use some action here. Suppose I have some files. Now let me go to this job, hello job. Anyhow, here I have defined ls-la. But in this runner echo command, I am creating one file. But you may see this hello.txt, but that is not part of our source code repository. This is on the fly in the workflow I am creating. Maybe let me delete this. Let me delete this. Now this cat hello.txt command will fail. So if this is failed, your job is also failed. Your workflow also failed. Some command is failed, your workflow also failed. We will see all those things. For now, let me just keep it minimal. Maybe let me remove all these things, additional jobs I don't need for now. Let's say this is like that. I have just kept maybe multiple commands or maybe single command. It's up to you. Let's say I'm just executing ls-la. You can do like this also. Single command ls-la. You don't see any files in that runner. In that runner, you may don't see any files. Even I have some files. Let me add all these things. Now I have committed. Now if I go to this actions again, this hello world action has been triggered. Now if I go back to this, there is only one job because I have removed only one job. In this job I have two steps. So here in this job two steps. So in that ls-la I have executed, but in that you don't see any files. You don't see any files ls-la. Even though I have some files in my repository, it is not available. So by default, it will not check out anything. So here you wanted to check out something here, you have to use some action, inbuilt action. There is some predefined actions. So in GitHub Actions, there is something called actions. There is something called action. Suppose imagine you might be thinking, I have a code. Maybe you may think execute demo script, but you might be written like this, thinking that you have a demo.sh file and you are giving executable permission. You are giving executable permissions and you are executing like that. Suppose if you thinking you have this, but this step will fail. By default, it will not check out anything. because here in this job, in this runner, it is not cloning anything. So how to check out that code also we'll see now. Let me say, now I have committed. Now if I go to this again actions, you may see this job, it is failed also. You can see it is failed. This workflow, hello world workflow, this is failed. Why it is failed also, you can see, go to this is failed. This job, the job has a multiple steps, and you can see the logs also. This execute demo script step is failed, saying that no such file or directory. I don't have demo.sh file. I don't have a demo.sh file like that. So if you see ls-lar also have kept, ls-lar also have kept, but it is not there. It will not clone anything by default. Here there is some actions. You can run some commands in these steps. You can run some commands, or there is something called actions. So here there is something called actions. This is like a predefined modules or a predefined code. So this GitHub is providing almost 20,000 plus actions. Here instead of saying run, you are saying use. In this step, you are saying use this actions. This is going to perform like a checkout, but you no need to give your GitHub URL. You no need to give your tokens like that, because this is going to clone this repository only. In this repository only have a workflow, right? So by default it will check out that. But this actions, what is this actions, how to use this actions, I will explain in a detailed way in the next session. So there is something called actions. There is something called actions. What is this actions? What type of actions, where you can find these actions, right? And what is this checkout action? What is this checkout action, right? What is this checkout action, how it works also we'll try to understand in the next session. But so far I have just giving the basics of GitHub actions. What is GitHub actions, what is workflow, what is jobs, what is on event, like that also, what is events, how to do that, how it will be executed, like that. So here this checkout actions multi-line command I have already explained. Like this, instead of single you can have a multiple commands like this in the same step also. Like this same step also multiple commands you can define. Anyhow, this I have already explained, multi-line command. And also if you wanted to execute some shell script, you can do that. You can define the shell script. You make sure in your repo you have a shell script, and in your cells in your workflow you can define like that. But I have a script in my repo, but when I am trying to execute, it is saying it is not there because I have not checked out that actions. We will see checkout actions like that. Later we'll see how to how to execute the jobs sequentially. We have already done. So this I have already done, parallel job sequential. So this I have already done, like uses sorry needs, needs like that, needs needs like that, right? So this we have already explained. This I have already explained this also, right? This needs. Maybe this actions concept, only this actions and checkout action. So just to give an example, we will discuss in a what about this action. For now I will just give use like this. It is going to clone. Maybe just to let me complete this. Here I am saying uses this action like this. So this is a GitHub marketplace. If I click this also, it is going to take to the marketplace, right? So this is also one type of a predefined module. Like if required, you can define some values also. This uses this checkout v4 v6 like that. Again, if you don't define all these things also, it will clone some repositories, that repository, like that. So for now I am just defining just like this. Maybe v5 also there, v6 v4 like that, version 5 checkout like that. Now let me commit this change. Now it will clone. This step is like a checkout repository cloning. it can clone your source code. That can be a Java code, Python code, or Node.js code also. You have later here, instead of having a LSLR like that, maybe you can have Java Maven used, build your package. Later you can build a Docker image, you can push the Docker image. So since it's a training, I'm starting with very fundamentals or basics. But if you see the GitHub Actions pipelines also, you can see in one of my actual application here. If you see in this static web app, so this is how you will write a pipelines using I might say GitHub workflow pipelines. You can see something like this. So here, now you can easily understand. Now you can easily understand all these things. Like this is like a name of your workflow. This workflow will be executed whenever you are pushing some code to the main branch. This is your source code, like a static website, dynamic website, or APIs. And again, this is one job, build and apply. That job will be executed on this runner. And here I have a steps. So first I'm checking out the code, whatever code in that Git repository. Then I'm executing one command, docker login -u username password. But this username and passwords I'm using a secrets, GitHub secrets. We will discuss about secrets, we will discuss about variables later, but understand the concept. Now this is one step in the job. This is another step, building, pushing, then deploying. Deploying is also one more step, but here I am using some actions. This is one plugin, like a SSH plugin like that. So all these are like a pre-built actions provided by GitHub only. We will discuss about that action. Using this, you are remotely connecting to that deployment server, and you are creating a container for that. You are deploying that application container. Again, you wanted to send a notification. This is also one type of action, like a plugin. Here you are giving your SMTP details and you are sending a mails like that also, right? So this is how you can use GitHub Actions. But if I directly explain all these things now, you may not understand all these things. So that's why first we are understanding what is workflow, what is this, what is jobs, right? What is steps. Slowly we'll understand. If you see this, we are going to cover in a detailed way. We are going to cover in a detailed way all these things, like events, variables, secrets, conditions, timeouts, right? And again, we are going to implement a pipeline, like building a container image and deploying that container image to the Kubernetes cluster also, using self-hosted runners and cloud host, hosted runners from GitHub, and self-hosted runners also will implement all these things. But it takes time. Today is just a second session of this GitHub Actions, right? So still we'll discuss about maybe another 3-4 sessions. We'll discuss on this GitHub Actions only, so that you can understand in case if you have to implement a CI/CD using GitHub Actions, so how you can do all these things also, you'll understand. Thank you. That's it for this session. Try to practice whatever has been discussed. That is very, very important, so that you can easily manage your work also without a proxy, without any support also, right? So as I already said, at Rushi Technologies, we are offering a detailed, project oriented, real time oriented, scenario oriented training. It is not like what is what. We will be discussing about each and every tool individually, right? Theoretically, we'll try to understand what is the tool, where we will use, what are the advantages, what challenges it is trying to solve. Later, we'll try to integrate each tool with other tools also, and we'll take applications, we'll implement a CI/CD, we'll implement monitoring, alerting, logging, log aggregation, virtualized deployment, containerized deployments, container orchestrations, right? And service mesh tools like Istio, build and deployment using Jenkins, and build and deployment using GitHub Actions also, and GitOps model in, with Argo CD, how we can deploy into Kubernetes, and how to troubleshoot, how to debug in case of any issues occurred. And again, if any application team is approaching you, right, saying that they wanted to build and deploy their applications into a Kubernetes clusters or a Docker Swarm clusters. So what type of input you can ask with them? So how you can start with that application onboarding, right? These type of things also nowadays asked in the interview. It is not like a straightforward, but with our extensive training, a DevOps with AWS Cloud Zero to Hero program, we will be discussing about all these things in a detailed way. As I already told, I am going to start a new DevOps with AWS Cloud batch, where we are going to cover all these things in a detailed way, right? Six and a half month training from March 7th. March 7th evening, we will have a demo. Regular classes will start from March 9th. It's an evening batch. The batch timings will be 7:30 to 9:15 p.m. IST. And I will be providing a detailed soft copy materials to each and every tool, and I will be providing a topic wise interview questions and answers, and we will be having access to the recordings for 1.5 years. And also there will be a dedicated trainer support. If you are getting any issues, errors while practicing, I am always available for you guys to address your questions or queries via Discord channel, Discord group. And again, every day at the end of the session, if you have any questions, any queries, you can unmute and ask also, right? That dedicated trainer support will be there. Resume preparation sessions will be there. Topic wise interview questions will be discussed in the sessions also, and real time use cases scenarios, so that you can easily challenge and you can easily compete with the person who already works in a DevOps for 4 to 5 years of experience. Okay. Thank you. That's it for today. From here, I'll continue in the next session. Kindly reach out to Rushi Technologies for any DevOps and cloud trainings on these numbers, and you can visit our website for any further updates. And kindly subscribe our YouTube channel, Rushi Technologies YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube, you can search YouTube, you can go to YouTube and you can search Rushi Technologies also if required. So Rushi Technologies, this is the channel, this one. You can see this company logo. This is the channel. So please subscribe and share with your friends, your colleagues. For more updates also, you'll find here. Thank you. We'll continue in next session.